I'm Whitney. I'm the National Communications Manager here at Run for Something. Today, we're going to discuss how to talk to voters about hot button issues when running for school board. First of all, I just want to name the thing. I recognize that we've all seen the viral clips that we know school board races are cultural flashpoints at this moment. It seems to be the hot spot for the culture wars. And it can seem downright intimidating, frightening, or uncomfortable to run. But I'm here to remind you that one, you have more in common with most of your community members than anyone yelling at a lectern at a school board member. And two, we're the ones we've been waiting for. We need good people to stand up to extremists and run and win. I'm just like a lot of you all. I'm a mom to an elementary school aged kid in a public school. I'm a parent leader in my kids' school. I am outraged by some of the things that I see happening in my home state, but we have to stand up. We have to fight back. And know that when you do this, you will not do it alone. Run for Something will be with you every step of the way. We're here to help you with your race and with your election. We're here to find partners for you in community to make sure that you don't have to do this alone. Real change starts with real people standing up to do the right thing for kids and communities for public education. And that's why we need you. So I want to get into a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. Back in 2022, Run for Something worked with a group called Avalanche Insights. We wanted to better understand how people across the country felt about the state of education and school boards. So what do? We ran a massive study. The study included 30,000 respondents over the age of 18 nationwide. Now, these were different races, ages, educational levels, genders, and we sorted out by the presidential preference they had in the 2020 elections. We wanted to get their thoughts and feelings related to what we described as the experience of children in schools and their communities. So through their responses, we were able to build a really deep understanding of the complex and internalized narratives people hold around education, including safety, academics, racism, and those flashpoint issues like critical race theory, book banning, and teaching honest history. This video is going to walk us through those findings and figure out how we can shift and mobilize voters around educational issues. So how do people feel? Overwhelmingly, y'all, our neighbors, the respondents of this survey, told us that they feel fear and anxiety and sadness when they think about children in schools in their communities. Gun violence really was the top fear, and that was followed closely behind concerns around the quality of education children are receiving, and surprisingly, bullying. Knowing these top concerns, we were able to test several messages to activate voters from fear to hope to action around education. So that's like the trajectory we want you to remember. People are fearful, we want to make them feel hopeful, and then we want them to act on the hope. Now, the messaging formula we tried to move the people the most was we want to lead with a shared value of freedom. Instead of saying every child should be safe from, we found it's more powerful to say should have freedom to be safe from. And you may wonder, Whitney, that seems so minor. Why is that? Using a freedom frame elicited more hope than a pure safety frame, which elicited more fear in our test. So we want to use messaging that pushes people past fear and reaction into believing that larger change is possible. So we want to lean into those ideas that children should have the freedom to be safe from. The other thing is we just want to make sure that we're all being really explicit about race and class. And I know that may feel uncomfortable, but we can do it. So instead of saying every child or all kids or everyone, these really blanket statements, we want to say things like every child, no matter the color of their skin, how much their parents earn, or what neighborhood they live in, deserves. We want to be explicit by what everyone means. So that is going to pose us in a stark contrast from opponents who try to divide us and pit us against each other based on race or class. So be explicit about race and class, name the thing. The third thing we want to do is characterize the problem. You need to talk about the problems that are at stake in your area. So if your area is seeing an issue with school funding, say the thing. If your school district is having issues with teacher retention, say the thing. If it's teacher pay, say it. If it's classroom size, you need to characterize the problems and you need to talk about what's at stake. So name the issues that people in your community are mentioning. A useful tactic, if you're going door to door and talking to people, listen. When you ask them what issues do they care about the most, listen and start compiling a running list. Then you know the problems that your community is facing and you can research and address them head on. So something that's really important too is you need to name the villain and their intent. Okay, so in order for you to be a hero, in order for you to be perceived as someone who is stepping up for your community, there needs to be a bad guy. However, you don't just want to talk about a party or a group. You can't just say conservatives. You want to say who the villain is and what their intent is. So just name dropping a party can cause people to back into those partisan corners. But if we clearly identify where things are going wrong, you can position yourself as a leader that knows how to make things right and rise above the fray. Okay, now the fifth thing you want to do is describe the solution and positive outcomes. Say the thing. Once again, it's always so important to be candid and honest and to say the thing. So be clear about what your community is facing and paint a picture of what's possible. For example, you could say, to prepare our kids for a complex world, we need to make sure America's schools keep kids safe, provide world-class academics and competitive training, attract and retain the best teachers, and provide mental health support so kids have the freedom to choose the path that's best for them after graduation. Now, why did we formulate that message? We want to describe what we're for when we paint a vision for what we want children in our community to experience. We want to paint a vision of what is possible when we join together to create change. Based on our research, people feel more motivated and hopeful when we paint a clear picture and a clear vision of what we're for, and we give them the opportunity to buy into that vision. So remember, when you are describing your vision, what you want schools to look like, make sure you focus on children and you find a way to bring people in. And that's going to lead to your call to action. So you may say, how do I put all of this together, Whitney? What would it look like? So check this out. This is what a core message could look and sound like. First, we list our shared value. Every child, no matter the color of their skin, their neighborhood, or how much their parent earns, should have the freedom to walk their school hallways without fear of gun violence. And every child should have the freedom to learn and be themselves without harmful bullying. So do you see we listed our shared value and then we listed our problem. Next, we're going to talk more about the villains and the problems. And we're going to talk about the villain's intent because like we said, it's not just enough to name the bad guy. So that would sound like, but many self-serving politicians, that's the villain, are stoking fear by banning books, inciting hatred toward kids who are different, and directing vicious anger at teachers and parents. That's the problem, y'all. And all they want to do is distract and divide us, score political points, and cling to power. That's the intent of the villain. Does that make sense? Meanwhile, they're doing nothing to keep our kids safe. And so that's pointing back to a problem. So we have our shared value. We talk about the problems. We talk about the villain, and we talk about the villain's intent. Now we want to start bringing people into the solution with a hero statement. We know that when we come together, we can overcome the greatest challenges. We can look at our country's own history and see what people who came before us achieved, even when they thought it was impossible. So the hero or the people, the hero or the leaders in the community coming together. And now we're going to move into our call of action. This November, we will turn out elected leaders who will ensure our children have the freedom to thrive. leaders who will help our schools attract and retain the best teachers, promote academic excellence, provide mental health support, and remain laser focused on keeping our kids safe and free to be kids. That's how we'll protect our freedoms, by showing up in record numbers to elect leaders who will tie us all together rather than tear us apart. It's up to us to decide our kids' futures. Okay, so you see how that all came together? The first part, we shared a value. The second part, we discussed what went wrong. The third part, we invited people in to become the hero, and we gave them a call to action around our shared values. So that's what creating a core message would look like. So don't forget those 6 parts of your message: your hero, the problem, the values, the villain's intent, and a motivating call to action to allow people to make their community a better place, hopefully by voting for you. So now you may say, all right, Whitney, all that sounds fine and dandy, but I'm not always going to be at a press conference. I'm not always going to be giving a stump speech. Sometimes I'm going to meet someone at a door or at a community meeting, and they're going to be mad. And I need to know how to diffuse that situation and how to bring them down off of these cultural flashpoint issues. These topics were mentioned organically in our survey among respondents at really low levels in our research. We didn't prompt them, even among, the furthest right candidate, even among the furthest right participants, we didn't have these come up that much when we asked about education. More of the issues were based on things we previously talked about. But if they do arise, here are some ways to respond. First, CRT. When you hear them say, CRT makes right children ashamed, okay. Or when you hear them say, certain books are inappropriate for students and should be removed. Here's what you're going to do. You're always going to plant and pivot. So you're going to say something like, politicians who are creating a panic about, insert the issue, here it's going to be CRT, or just manipulating parents and pretending they care about kids instead of making sure our schools have the resources they need to help every student learn and achieve, or doing anything in the very real gun crisis affecting our nation's schools. Now, why are you going to do that? If we start arguing with them about really specific wedge issues, we're playing on their battlefield and we can just get bogged down in the details. You don't want to give this conversation oxygen that the opposition wants it to have. Rise above it. Focus on what our kids do need to thrive in schools, and because that's what people crave and that's what people want to know, that moves them into a positive direction and away from fear and hopelessness. All right, everyone's favorite word of the summer, woke. So when you hear someone say, oh, go woke, go broke, or just anything like that, when you hear them say rewriting history is unpatriotic and you're making kids feel guilty for nothing they have to do about, nothing they had to do anything with, or when we talk about race, we just make it worse. What we want to do is we want to say, with caring teachers as guides, our students should be able to dig deeper into our nation's history, especially the experiences of Black and Indigenous Americans. This is the only way we'll learn important lessons about the hard truths from our country's past, looking at our present with honesty, and by having the courage to do what's right for future generations. And why do we want to do that? We want to acknowledge the experiences of Black and Indigenous Americans in our response. Our research indicated that only among a tiny amount of voters did we see any backlash or shift in voter behavior when race was explicitly mentioned. So it's not going to hurt you. More than likely, it's going to help you, especially with the Black and Indigenous communities that are listening, who are like, right on, we should talk about that. Now, another flashpoint we've been seeing, especially since the overturn of Roe, has been issues around sex ed and abstinence-only education. So when someone says, it's up to parents to teach their kids about sex, or teaching kids abstinence reduces teen pregnancy, while if we teach kids sex ed, they're going to want to have sex. You just have to be honest and tell you the truth. So instead, you should say something like, whether we like it or not, students are going to learn about sex from their peers in the internet. It's important that health and sex education teach accurate information about contraception, pregnancy, and LGBTQIA+ identities. And you may ask, why? Because addressing sex education by putting it into context of where kids will learn it, if they're not taught at school, if they are not taught using accurate language and information, that performed well with respondents across partisan beliefs. So the key there was making sure that you're really addressing where else they're going to learn this information if they're not learning it in an accurate, safe environment like their school. All right, so those are just a few of the things that you may want to consider when you discuss your run and your positions when you're running for school board. All right, so that's all I have for you today. Those were just a few of the hot button issues you may encounter when you are discussing your candidacy with your neighbors while running for school boards. But you now know how to combat it. You have a formula that helps you identify villains, problems, and ill intent, and you know how to shift the narrative to talk about heroes and visions of what is possible. You know when people start to get really intense about everything that they may have a grievance with, you know how to recenter the conversation, to rise above it, and to talk about what students need most. You have the tools to go out when people want to argue with you, to pivot the conversation in a more positive direction. Every voter is not going to agree with everything you say, but most voters believe in common sense education for our students from level-headed, trusted, community-minded individuals. And that's just who you are. And we're so excited you're running. So all of this information is going to be available in our Running for School Board guide on this webpage. We want to make sure that you're following Run for Something on Twitter at Run for Something, or on Instagram at Run for Something Now. So you know when we have upcoming events coming up. We have some like virtual training scheduled and even some in-person events across the country. And we want to make sure you know you're following us to make sure you know how to apply for our endorsement once you're on the ballot. You can do this, from one parent to another, from one community cheerleader to another, from one person that loves books to another person that loves books, from a human to a human who cares about children and the next generation. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for considering standing up and running for school board. We need you. My kid needs you. All of our kids need you. We're the ones you've been waiting for. And RFS will be here to help you every step of the way.